the public hearings, but it's late in the session, and if we're going to, these bills have any chance of passing, if they're voted out of committee, we'll move them along today. So we will be voting on those two bills. House Bill 83, sponsors Representative Garrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 83 and 84, which is the next bill, really are the same issue. These are both bills that I'm carrying on behalf of the state treasurer. They would allow for 100% virtual meetings, which they've been allowed to meet in that fashion during the COVID pandemic by virtue of the governor's executive order. There's an omnibus meeting bill that requires a minimum of 3 people. There's an amendment in that bill that would allow for this to happen. So this would basically allow these boards, there's 3 boards, 2 here before you today. The state treasurer is a member or runs those boards that would allow for participation 100% virtually. These are boards that require high degree of financial expertise, members from all over the state. And
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move for favor.
House Bill 83 is in moving favorable report by Coleman Madison and seconded by the Gavan. All those in favor? Now, first we got to establish a quorum, voting quorum. Call the roll.
Senator Albritton, Senator Chambliss, Senator Coleman Madison,
Aye.
Senator Elliott,
Aye.
Senator Gavan,
Aye.
Senator Gudger, Senator Orr, Senator Roberts,
Aye.
Senator Fortier, Senator Shelnut, Senator Butler, Senator Hawley.
Aye. 8-0, the bill is given a favorable report. We'll have House Bill 84. Same motion by the same individual.
Yes.
Seconded by Gavan. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And the ayes have it. House Bill 84 is given a favorable report.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee.
House Bill 390, Representative Bedsoe. Favorable report by Senator Gavan, seconded by Elliott. All those in favor of favorable report say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill is given a favorable report.
Thank you, committee.
Thank you for that long explanation.
House Bill 446 by Representative Standridge. A report by Shelnut, seconded by Elliott. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Bill's given a favorable report. House Bill 359, Representative Brown, C.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. House Bill 359. This is the second part of a bill we passed last year, the Sexual Assault Victims Bill of Rights. And what this does, I worked with the State Forensic Lab and Angelo Del Monte with this. And what this does, it requires every criminal justice agency and university to report the number of sexually oriented criminal offenses each year. It also requires them to report the number of sexual assault cases submitted for forensic analysis and the number of reported sexual assault cases closed during the due to judicial or investigative reasons. And it also requires them to report if they don't have any sexual assault cases or if they have any new evidence.
Move to approve.
Second.
Coleman Madison moves to go to the bill of favorable report, seconded by Elliott. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And the ayes have it. The bill is given a favorable report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members.
Senate Bill 335, Senator Hatcher.
Chairman Hawley,
Senator.
we'll talk about a rookie mistake. I was sitting up there thinking I was on the committee.
It's first meeting.
This bill is a simple bill that allows the municipalities that the size of Montgomery, of course, and those that fit in class 3, to hold hearings with property owners of property that's basically deemed as nuisance, and just to hold hearings and make recommendations to those individuals.
Did we not pass this House version?
We did.
I thought we did.
We did.
I moved to give the bill a favorable report, seconded by Senator Orr. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I need to abstain from that and also be added to the roll, please.
Senate Bill 333 is given a favorable report. Les Gutcher. who is
Need to
present.
abstain to be added, and Senator Butler, I assume, does need to be added to the roll also.
That one passed, right?
We call House Bill
Passed.
312 by Representative Oliver. Here in the legislation today is Senator Barfoot.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. This bill is almost identical to the bill that this committee passed out. And I said almost identical is that the House version of the bill actually incorporates two different elements that I believe are extremely important. I'd had an opportunity to talk with Senator Coleman Madison, and I believe some language that she was supportive of is now in the House bill, and that language is that this bill would not prohibit the teaching of historical facts or history based on a factually accurate interpretation or factually accurate description of those historical facts. I said earlier to this committee that the word critical race theory or CRT is not mentioned in this bill. There are 9 divisive or divisive concepts that are included. And I think if the members, I know you've had an opportunity to read through there, that those 9 divisive concepts are some that I think we could all and should all agree that we should not be teaching or trying to instill in our children or throughout government. And some of those is that because of your age or, sex or
as activists in our school system. So we need to really stick to the math, science, reading, and all that, and keep all this other stuff outside. But the big thing is when you go in and look at these CEOs and really what the heart is for our kids, they think the school is a catalyst to bring in all this social justice activism, and if that's something important, that's something on your heart, like I think that's good for a family. Like if you want to do that outside the school, that's fine, but don't bring it in, because whenever you start looking at some of these materials and some of these younger school-age kids, what they're trying to teach our kids, sexual content, transgender, all the other stuff, they're bringing that into the schools, and some of these minds, they're not developed enough to handle that information, especially at a young age. So any CRT, SEL, DI, whatever the acronyms is, we need to keep it out of our school because it's only teaching our kids to hate versus the opposite of it. So appreciate your time. Thank you.
Which one are they? Thank you, Mr. Thrasher. Recognize Rayford Mack.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good evening.
Thank you to Chairman Holly and the distinguished members of this committee for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Reverend Rayford Mack, and I'm executive member at large of the Alabama State Conference of the NAACP. Okay, thank you, sir. I offer my remarks today on behalf of the Alabama NAACP and the NAACP Legal Defense Fund and Educational Fund. America and Alabama has a rich history that must be taught to all students. Slavery and the civil rights movements are part of Alabama history. The tragedies and triumph that took place in Alabama, from Montgomery bus boycott to the Selma to Montgomery March, awakened the entire nation to the reality of racial injustice. The vagueness of Alabama House Bill 312 and Senate Bill 292 are likely to cause confusion in the Alabama classroom, causing teachers to eliminate discussion regarding the importance of realities of Alabama history, for fear of violating the law if enacted. We are also afraid that due to the ambiguous nature of the language, the implementation of this bill may look different from city to city or county to county. Educators should not be expected to teach under unclear rules that may require them to sacrifice accurate teaching. Educators who fear that important but difficult concepts could result in guilt or anguish and may completely abandon these topics. As you are well aware, situations have already surfaced indicating that educators are confused as to the prohibitions of recently adopted Board of Education resolution, which addresses issues similar to the one contained in House Bill 312 and Senate Bill 292. Finally, these bills may conflict with current state standards. For example, high school social studies standards require discussion regarding the abolitionist movement, the Ku Klux Klan, and the Great Migration and the Freedom Ride. In order to develop lessons in alignment with Alabama state standards, educators must be free to engage students in robust and thoughtful discussions of topics pertaining to racial inequalities in America. Therefore, we implore that this committee and the House and Senate members to support racially inclusive school curricula and protect the ability of students and educators to engage in robust discussion encompassing the full spectrum of American history. A quality education must include an accurate and honest accounting of history to provide students with the skills and tools to become analytically thinkers and the next generation of leaders. We urge you to totally reject the proposed legislation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mack. Recognize Lisa McNair.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for letting me have a few moments. I too want to oppose that bill because I feel that that bill will inhibit the teaching of the life of my sister, Denise McNair. She was one of the 4 girls killed in the infamous 16th Street Baptist Church bombing in 1963. And her story is not CRT or whatever that is, because I really don't know and I really don't care. But it's true history. It's the loss of a family of 4 little girls who were doing what we as Alabamians want to and espouse, going to church, praising our Lord. And they were killed for no reason but the color of their skin. But this story needs to be taught and shared, as well as other historic civil rights stories need to be taught and shared, because they're the true stories of American history. Not only that, when I travel the country sharing my parents' story, my parents could have chosen to be hateful and evil people, but they chose to teach us how to love and to forgive. And people are often stunned that how could your parents be that way when they were experienced such a heinous crime? But that also is our shared American history that needs to be taught and needs to be shared. Is it going to be an uncomfortable conversation? Of course it is. But life is uncomfortable. Nobody promised us that it was going to be roses and Disney movies every day. But this is very important that we learn this and our students learn this. Not only that, the history of the civil rights movement and people in the civil rights movement did not operate with guns or knives or violence, but they operated through Christ and through love and simple and protest where they were nonviolent. And we have children today who need to learn that our American laws can come together and we can fight for them, but we have to fight for them honestly and kindly and with respect, because that is who we are as Americans. And it just bothered me, and I drove all the way down here thinking I might get run over by a tornado, but I had to come and share that with y'all today. And I hope that y'all will please think about that and not vote this bill.
Ms. McNair, was your father in the legislature?
My father was here.
I had the honor of serving with him in
You
the House.
did?
Yes, fine, honorable man.
Wonderful. Yeah, he enjoyed being here, and he was a good legislator. He worked with white people and black people.
Yes, he did.
And he served honorably.
Sure did.
So,
thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Joe Kahn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Joe Cohn. I'm the Legislative and Policy Director at FIRE, the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education. We are national leaders in free speech and due process on college campuses, and we have represented the interests of students and faculty on every part of the political spectrum when they've been subjected to censorship, including here in Alabama. I have only 2 concerns about portions of the bill. First of all, our mission is exclusively higher ed, so I'm entirely neutral on the K-12 applications. But there's black letter case law that says that it's unconstitutional for there to be government interference into what can be taught in college classrooms. And that is why the bill attempts to do a carve out for that early in it when it talks about the prohibition on promoting and inculcating. It's promoting to K-12 students. A really small problem with that is that sometimes you have K-12 students who are attending college classes. So it could still impact the curriculum there with the wording that you have it. Second problem is that later on in the bill, when you get to the bottom of page 5, top of page 6, so you're talking section 4, subsection B, you say that nothing in this act shall be construed to prohibit a public institution of higher education from providing any instruction in furtherance of satisfying any accreditation standard, or, and here you have it, discussing any divisive concept in an objective manner and without endorsement as part of a larger course of academic instruction. Of course, you can't mandate that people must teach objectively. I don't know that anyone would know what that means anyway in terms of vagueness, but a conservative faculty member is allowed to have a conservative point of view and advocate it. That's part of academic freedom. There's been 65 years of case law from the Supreme Court on this, multiple Supreme Court decisions. That provision should be changed before you get to your final bill. And the last one is really a small concern too, but it is the section that tries to tackle action civics, and it deals with students not being, forced into, engaging in lobbying. You can do that, but you set forth only one point of view that students aren't allowed to lobby for, which would subject the bill to strict scrutiny, as opposed to other levels of scrutiny. If you wanted to say that, students have to be allowed to opt out of lobbying on behalf of positions they don't hold, so they can't be forced to advocate for any position they don't hold, that would be perfectly constitutional. So that's the basics of my presentation. And all of these things are very easily fixed, and narrow fixes, but you need them if your bill is going to survive judicial scrutiny. And the only state so far that has enacted a bill that does anything unconstitutional along these lines is the one that's sitting on the governor's desk in Florida. All of the other states made requested changes to avoid curricular, implications that have passed. Oklahoma, Idaho, Iowa, South Dakota, you name it, they have all, even Tennessee, they've all made these changes. So, with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. And I want you to know that I'm not here to try to kill a bill. These concerns are narrow. I mean, we understand that there have been instances where anti-discrimination efforts in K-12 may have crossed the line into discriminatory conduct. But you don't solve that problem by doing a curricular ban in higher ed, even if you think that's a real, serious problem that you want to address.
Thank you, Mr. Khan. I appreciate your comments. I'm sure that the Senate sponsor of the bill was all ears on those comments, and should be in touch with you.
Thank you, and I'm here through tomorrow.
Tyler McIntyre. Tyler?
He was unable to come, but he made his statement. Is he allowed to submit a statement?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, Tyler. Bernard Millerton.
Good afternoon, Chairman Hawley and members of this committee. My name is Bernard Simonton. I'm president of the Alabama State Conference of the NAACP, and from Harvest, Alabama. I'm in Senator Butler's district there. I offer my remarks today on behalf of the NAACP, and unlike the gentleman that spoke before me, the NAACP is asking that you not vote this bill out of committee. Now, I want to explain my reasoning for stating that. And we know that bad legislation, we know what it can do for people in a state, and we know what bad legislation can do for a nation. And the NAACP has determined, based on its analysis, that SB 292 and HB 312 are not good for the state, nor is it good for teachers, nor is it good for the students, and nor is it good for our community. And we send our children to school to receive a good fact-based education, and whether that is in the area of science, math, English, or history, we want those subjects to be taught factually. Alabama has a rich history of many things, but it also has a dark history of slave trade. It has a history of the first Confederate White House here in the state of, in the city of Montgomery. And the slavery and the civil rights movement are parts of Alabama history. The tragedies that took place in Birmingham, as you've heard, the sister of one of the students killed already state. The march from Selma to Montgomery, which is Bloody Sunday. That is a part of Alabama history. We don't want to sweep that under the rug. We don't want to say that did not happen, because it did happen. And that could be considered a divisive concept, because it essentially put one group against another. Blacks were trying to achieve the right to vote, the simple right to go down just like anyone else to cast their ballot. And they were met on the bridge and tortured. So those are facts that we can't skip over, whether it's a part of Alabama history or a history of this nation. And I've had the opportunity to speak with Senator Barfoot and Representative Oliver, and I still find it difficult to understand what this legislation and how it's going to improve our school system. I don't think it's going to help on test scores. I don't think it's going to help those students who are taking those standardized tests improve their scores. However, I think it might have the opposite effects when those questions are on the test and students say, well, I don't understand this. I have not read about this. My teacher did not teach me that. And so we've got to be careful here to make sure that we do not, in any form or fashion, limit our students. Educators should not be expected to teach on unclear rules that may require them to sacrifice accurate teaching. Educators who fear the important but difficult concept could result in guilt or anguish and may completely abandon these topics. Additionally, students will likely challenge teachers. Students are not just going to allow a teacher, especially when you're talking about 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, allow a teacher to throw something out there and not challenge them. And we want them to challenge because we want them to become critical thinkers at that age. And if we start limiting, saying you can't talk about that subject, but I want to, teacher, I've read somewhere about that. Tell me what that means. No, the teacher would say, no, I can't talk about that. And that's wrong. As long as it's historical facts, not to get into, personal beliefs and things like that, but historical facts. And as we saw during African American History Month here in the state of Alabama, Dr. Mackey received phone calls stating that my son or daughter were being taught critical race theory. And he had to spend time going into schools explaining that, no, Black history is not critical race theory. But where one superintendent or where one person may believe that it is not, another person may believe that it is. The NAACP is not asking teachers to teach divisive concept or that one race is superior to another race, but to teach the historical facts so that children will understand the struggle that African Americans and other minority groups have had to overcome in Alabama, in the United States, to achieve a small portion of what we call the American dream. If you don't know your history, then you are doomed to repeat it. Senators, we urge you to vote no on this piece of legislation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Corinne O'Brien.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, good afternoon. And thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Corinne O'Brien. I'm the Vice President of Policy at A+ Education Partnership and a lifelong educator. I'm here to say that we do not support HB 312 for the following reasons. So first, the bill is unnecessary. The Alabama State Board of Education has already committed to ensuring that these divisive concepts that are outlined in this bill are not taught in Alabama's K through 12 schools. And even before this action by the board, these concepts were not and still are not a part of our nationally recognized social studies course of study that has been approved by the State Board of Education. Second, there will be serious unintended consequences in the classroom that will place a major burden on our already stressed teachers. And Alabama is facing a major teacher shortage right now, and COVID-19 has only increased this impact. A recent poll showed that around a third of educators would leave the classroom would laws like this one be enacted in the classroom. And additionally, as educators try to navigate new rules as what they can and cannot discuss in the classroom, they might avoid hard topics altogether, like a previous speaker mentioned. And that is to avoid serious consequences like losing their job. And that would be that our students would miss out on important opportunities to foster critical thinking, and also could altogether lose a teacher that would be really valuable to their education. Finally, the public conversation about bills like this one we're discussing today, coupled with the stifling of classroom discussions, can have negative impacts on students from marginalized communities and students that have different life experiences than their peers. Our schools should be a place where students come together to learn from, with, and about each other. We want our schools to create engaged, educated Americans who can think freely and engage with a wide variety of thoughts and ideas. Age-appropriate guidelines, of course, are appropriate and necessary, but banning any idea symbolically or explicitly restricts our students from having conversations in classrooms about current events, and as well as learning from our past, both our successes and our mistakes. We should trust and prepare our students to maturely, rigorously, and accurately discuss difficult subjects and be able to learn lessons that will brighten our state's future. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Robert White.
Good evening, Chairman. Good evening to the committee. My name is Robert White. I have been in post-secondary education for almost 30 years. Typically, I teach African-American humanities, but I also teach in the political science department and in the doctoral department on education. And I'm a product of Tallapoosa County schools. I went to Tallapoosa County, went to Reeltown for 2 years and Dadeville for 2 years, graduated at Dadeville. And I can't tell you how important the robust conversations that we had in my 11th grade and 12th grade government classes and social studies classes, how formative that was to me as a student. And the conversations that we had in Ms. Davis's class, Ms. Blankenship's class, and others stuck with me. But one of the things that I noticed was that a lot of students my age, we did not know how to talk about the subject. And we were grasping and trying to struggle with what we had heard and what we had gleaned from conversations, and had never really ourselves been challenged. And as a college instructor, I'm concerned whenever you start trying to go into the classroom and tinker with discussion, especially critical thought. And one of the questions that I pose to people when they ask me about what I think about critical race theory, because I'm also a pastor, also a part of the Southern Baptist Convention, and we've had discussions about that as well, is which of those three words is the most concerning? Is it race, is it theory, or is it critical? Now, if we are a republic, and republics are built off of individuals who have free thought, that means that critical thinking is the cornerstone of our existence, which means that if we're not allowed to think critically without fear of retribution, which would be an adverse employment action, then we're moving toward the lines, in my opinion, of being a totalitarian dictatorship. Might not look like it, but when you begin to say what we can and can't talk about, what we can and can't write papers about, what we can and cannot discuss, and you enforce it with a penalty, then what you're doing is you're instituting groupthink. And that's something that I think that is very detrimental to the republic. One of the things that I will say, as opposed to stifling free speech, and I've talked with Representative Oliver about it, we're basically from the same part of the woods, know the same people, and have the same affinity for our schools and our education, is let's move full speed ahead with actually teaching these issues that are critical, because our students do not need to look up and see havoc in the street before they begin to discuss something. They don't need to approach the issues of race when a social crisis comes up. It needs to be a bedrock aspect of the curriculum, and I can't think of a better place to discuss it than the classroom. The whole purpose of the classroom is to provide another opportunity for students to be objective without the fear of being overlooked or censored and so forth. So I'm a proponent of the classroom. Most of your critical race theory personalities, such as Derek Bell, emerged when universities were censoring professors who were writing dissertations and papers and books on subjects that certain people didn't like. And those adverse employment actions ended in discrimination lawsuits. So the whole purpose, I think, of education is to teach us how to use critical skills and critical thinking skills. And so being critical is nothing more than being factual, historical, qualitative, and quantitative. Why not discuss race in that matter? And I'll close by saying that our classroom should be the first place, or perhaps the second place, the home being the first, the second place where racial issues are discussed. But I have been to the EJI Museum, the Lynching Museum here in Montgomery, and I have seen the hundreds of people leave totally flabbergasted and breath being taken away, because that was the first time that they had come in contact with that historical fact. I'm saying let's let the classroom be the place where we discuss these issues, not on a bias level, but on an objective level to where all of the facts can be laid out. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman,
Elliott.
may I ask Senator Barfoot a question?
Sure.
Senator Barfoot, if you could, you brought this up early on, but could you reread Section 8 to the committee? This is on page 7, lines 9 through 11.
Absolutely. Section 8. Nothing in this act shall be construed to prohibit the teaching of topics or historical events in historically accurate context. And Senator, if I could say, and we've had this discussion in here on the Senate bill companion, my mama was a history teacher, and I guess that's probably where I get my love of history, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And there's plenty of that to go around. And I think it's important, Ms. McNair, I think it's important that we tell your sister's story. There is no question about that. To do so would be a dishonor to her memory. To do so would be a dishonor to those folks that have fought that same battle over in the past. And I think we must tell that story. That section is in here for that reason. We must tell the good, the bad, and the ugly. To do so would be a disservice to those who've come before us.
Senator Gavan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So going between the hotel I stay at and the State House, I often ride by this quote on the side of a building in Montgomery. History, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived, but if faced with courage, need not be lived again. That's something that we've got to deal with. I mean, there's a lot of history that is ugly. That's a fact. And I don't see of these 9 issues that are prohibited by this that stops anyone from talking about slavery and the slave trade, that stops anyone from talking about segregation, Jim Crow, Reconstruction, whatnot. So I hear that, well, the education community, they've assured us they're not teaching this. They've assured us they're not teaching Common Core too. So I don't take a lot of stock in that. So I don't know if it's the proper time, but I would move for a favorable report.
I would like to speak.
Senator Soye.
So, I'm really heartbroken that we are in this moment because what we're really talking about is not this bill. I mean, there's not a person out there who would say to A, that one race, sex, or religion is inherently superior to another race, sex, or religion. Is there anybody out there who agrees that that should be taught? We know that shouldn't be taught in our schools, right? That this state or the United States is inherently racist or sexist. I don't agree with that. I don't think that should be taught. I don't think people think that should be taught. I think the problem with this conversation is that there's pain on both sides. And that pain is too often making us react to one another rather than converse in love. I mean, that's really the crux of it. I mean, most of us don't even know what critical race theory is, like Ms. McNair said. As an attorney myself, when I went to look it up and try to understand it, I saw the first thing is that when one of the ladies who helped to do it, when she said, from some Ivy League law school professor said, well, really it's a complex legal analysis. I was like, oh no, we're not. We're none of us are talking about critical race theory. We're not. What we're really doing is kind of mixing our fears. We're grappling with our fears. Some folks on one side are scared that their history will be completely ignored and taken out of schools. Folks on the other side are feeling like they're going to be forced to digest some hate-based history. And it's really fear that's talking on both sides. It's not one-sided. It really is fear that's talking on both sides. And if our republic, if our country is going to thrive and heal, we are going to have to address this from a place of love. Fear will kill us. It is not going to help us heal. It's not going to help us thrive as a country. Fear is literally going to suck the life. And it's on both sides. Fear is driving us. It's driving us in the state house. It's driving us in the streets. It's driving us. And it's breaking my heart because I believe we serve a God who calls us to faith, not fear. He says his greatest commandment is love. And yet we are reacting out of fear. And I do want to emphasize that it's on both sides. Because this bill is really not saying what many folks out there are scared of. And at the same time, out of fear, passing it could be driven by fear in our classroom, so people just won't touch it. They won't talk about civil rights. They won't talk about how we actually came together and changed. Because we are better. We're not like we used to be. We're not. But we might, out of fear, people might not touch this because it's controversial on its face. So I'm deeply concerned that we are reacting out of fear. And I have proposed some legislation that I think is based on love that will help us to heal as a state. And I really would hope, my request is that we take a first step based on love instead of fear before we handle this particular piece of legislation. It's not that there's anything wrong with it. On its face, like if you take the words literally, right? The things that I raised, people are not disagreeing with that. They're not disagreeing with that, but they are scared that this will mean that, especially people who have already felt invisible, right? Treated like they may not, what their feelings, their pain doesn't exist. It's a fear. So you're looking at this as a lawyer saying, there's nothing in here that says what you're scared of, right? You're looking at the literal wording. And what I'm saying to you, all of you, is that that's not what people are alarmed about. It's not the literal wording. It's the fear that comes from having your great-grandmama lynched. Do you understand that that's not a rational, literal fear? It's not the words that is creating the concern. It's the pain that's been passed down, and on both sides. I also want to say, if this was applied to the Senate, I would have never had this conversation with Senator Gudger when he took me downtown and showed me the sign about how much an enslaved African cost and how most white folk could not have afforded that. We couldn't have had that conversation. But I tell you that conversation made me sympathetic to folks in a way that I had never been before. I was thinking about what it meant to have pain passed down from generation to generation from an African American perspective. That's what I was thinking about. But when I was able to have this conversation with him, I thought, what would it have been like for a poor farmer to have somebody from the north just come through and all your stuff is gone? I never had that thought before. But because we were able to talk it through without fear and in love, we were out, my whole mind, my whole world opened up in a different kind of way. And so my hope, my request is not that you don't handle the bill, but that if you would just give us a little time to work through as a state, to kind of come back around and say, how do we address this from a place of love? Because I can tell you there's not a person out there who wants the things that you have enumerated here. We don't want that taught in schools. We don't want that taught in schools. But what's driving the conversation is fear, and fear on both sides. So I would just respectfully ask that you would carry it over to give us a chance to work this thing out from a place of love. In fact, I'm going to be quiet because I know I've taken up a lot of time. But I was thinking when this whole CRT thing came out, I was thinking to myself, you know, this is really not the issue because most of us don't understand CRT. And I was talking to the Lord and I was like, well, actually I wasn't talking to the Lord. I was just thinking out loud and I was like, you know, I really wish that Christians, and I know that there's a separation of church and state, but I was saying to myself, I really wish that Christians could come forward with something that was biblically based in love, that was a solution to the issues of race, and where we would not keep reacting to other people's solutions, right? When CRT comes up, we're just reacting to what somebody else says is a solution. But what I know from loving each and every one of you at this table is that we have in us a solution to these issues. But if we just react, and on both sides, we keep kind of making it harder for us to have a biblically based love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as thyself solution. Because really, that's all we need. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joe. Any comments or motions?
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Fortier, I really enjoyed hearing you and your discussion, and I agree totally with you. We have come a long way. That doesn't mean we don't have work to do. As long as there's humans involved, we probably will have work to do. My interest in this bill stems from teaching, and I try to always leave my children out of this discussion, but I can't in this case. Try to teach them to love one another as Christ loved me and you, and to love each other, work with each other, help each other, support each other. And when they come home from school in tears because of what they have been subjected to, because maybe they didn't go through some of the things that other people did, and they're made to feel belittled. That's not right. That goes against what you're saying, against what I want us to do. That's the lens that I am looking at this in. That does not need to happen. Adults should not push students in a direction. There should be this open discussion. There should be factual discussion. But when they get to the point they're pushing them so hard that they come home just distraught, that's too far. That is happening in our schools. That has happened to my children. And I'm not saying I'm looking at it objectively and right, because we all bring our experiences to the table. So we have to address that, in my opinion. Now, does this bill go too far? I don't know. We can discuss that between now and when it comes to the floor and that kind of thing. but it's very important that those that are in authority do not overextend that authority and push back. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank Senator Fortier because I do feel as she does that this is about fear on both sides. And I guess we dove into that pool ourselves when we talk about fear, because we are lawmakers. We have to address uncomfortable issues. We have to be fair to everybody. Someone mentioned that there are two places that this discussion should start. Number one, it should start in the home. I've often said we cannot legislate morality or religion, but that discussion should have started at home about teaching our children that everybody doesn't look like you or I. People are different. They come from different nationalities. They speak different languages. They look different. And when I thank God for public television, because I'm learning a lot about my past. I'm learning about things that happened to people that look like me. And my great-great-grandmother was a slave. I could trace it back. I knew Granny Rose because she lived to get 107 years old. But I often said, if I knew then what I know now, to be able to ask her some questions. But we don't teach that in our homes, that there are people that are different, that there are people that were disenfranchised. If that discussion had happened at home long time ago, the children would not be in tears. They would probably be able to add something to the conversation and say that, yes, those things happened, but it wasn't right. So I think we have to start looking at ourselves in the mirror. And yes, the fear, it is fear. It is a fear that this particular piece of legislation will be misinterpreted and taken out of context. The world is not flat. Yes, we did put people on the moon, and there have been several people that have gone to the moon. But I can remember my neighbor down the street never believed that the person went to the moon. Is this where we want our children to be? I mean, I'm going beyond this because it is how people can take this too far, because they ought not to be teaching that. This is not something that we believe. What you believe ought to be taught in your home. That child should leave that house with a strong foundation of who they are and what their parents believe. And when they get to school, yes, be able to have intelligent discussions about it. But we should be open-minded unless we're going to live in a bubble. These children they're already on the internet and every place else, so they're all over the world. They do watch world events and find out what's going on in the world right now today and why is this happening? What have these people done? So it goes beyond just this little thing right here. And as I told you in reading this, I told somebody, I said, I really ought to be championing this bill. I ought to be for it. There's nothing in it on face value that you read into it. It's the underlying fear. About Black people was that we were slaves, we were subservient, and the roles that we played always pictured us in that role, never of someone other than Booker T. Washington or George Washington Carver. Never as someone of prominence who made contributions, who had great inventions. Alabama history didn't teach that. And as a little Black girl from Hueytown, as I said, from outhouse to the state house,
Call roll. Final passage.
Senator Albritton, Senator Chambliss, Senator Coleman Madison.
No.
Senator Elliott.
Aye.
Senator Gavan. Senator Gudger. Senator Orr. Senator Roberts, Senator Sanders Fortier, Senator Shellnut, Senator Butler, Senator Hawley.
Aye. 9-2, the bill is given in favor of report. House Bill 322, a public hearing. And I'm going to take a little break myself, and while the vice chair handles the podium.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for, if I could, thank you for hearing me out on this bill, and thank you for your comments. Well received, and thank you.
Thank you, members. Thank y'all for the opportunity to present House Bill 322 to y'all today. It has been a long committee meeting with public hearings. I'm going to be very brief. In my conclusion, I'll take any questions that y'all may have, if that's okay, Mr. Chairman. HB 322 is a K-12 gender bathroom bill. This is a problem that was brought to my attention in the early fall this past year. And the bill basically is short and sweet. It says whatever your birth certificate, original birth certificate states your gender, that is the bathroom you use in K-12 schools. That's as far as it goes. It is strictly for K-12 schools. It also, I think one of the most important parts of it is it says restrooms, locker rooms, change rooms, or showers, if you can imagine the opposite sex being in those. With that, I'm going to move to the public hearing, Mr. Chairman, and in conclusion, I'll take questions.
Thank you very much for stacking. We're going to start the public hearing. First speaking is Tish Fawkes, and we are close on time, so we're going to limit this to 2 minutes per speaker.
Chairman Hawley and members of the committee, the American Civil Liberties Union of Alabama testifies today in strong opposition to HB 322. I am counsel for plaintiffs in Corbett versus Taylor, a case challenging Alabama's policy forcing transgender people to undergo surgery before they may change the sex designation on their state-issued ID, specifically their driver's license. As such, I am familiar with the prevailing doctrine governing litigation in this area of law and have direct knowledge of the costs, both financial and social, incurred by the government when it seeks to target and discriminate against people with no rational basis, let alone an important government interest. By targeting and isolating transgender children and young adults for discrimination and excluding them from restrooms and locker rooms that match their gender identity, HB 322 discriminates based on transgender status and sex in violation of the United States Constitution and Title IX of the Civil Rights Act. If passed, this bill would send a message to vulnerable youth that they are not welcome or accepted in their communities. It also would expose all of Alabama's school districts and the state to the potential loss of federal funding for education. The current Supreme Court has already declined to review a federal appeals court decision concluding that policies like the one proposed here violate the Constitution and statutory rights of transgender students.
Ms. Fawkes, that's 2 minutes. If you can wrap it up very quickly for us, please.
Sorry about that, Chairman.
That's quite all right.
Even just considering lawsuits by private individuals, these cases are extremely costly. In Virginia, a school district paid $1.3 million in attorney's fees after spending years unsuccessfully defending its policy of banning transgender students from restrooms that align with their gender identity. If passed, HB 322 will put school districts in this state in the untenable position of facing huge liability if forced to comply with state law.
Thank you, ma'am, for your comments. The next speaker is Vanessa Finney. Ms. Finney, 2 minutes if we can make that happen, please. Thank you.
Yes, please. Thank you, Chairman and esteemed committee members. My name is Vanessa Tate Finney, and I am here on behalf of my husband and our son who cannot be here due to work and school, respectively. I'm here because my husband, our transgender son, our family strongly believes that this bill is a solution in search of a problem. I imagine that most of you are parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles. How would you feel if your child were shut out of a fundamental human right, such as using a restroom? What if your child, grandchild, niece, or nephew were to come out as transgender? How would you justify this position to them? This bill is an embarrassment to the state of Alabama and endangers our gender-expansive youth. Transgender children do not simply decide to identify as transgender for a day to gain access to opposite-sex restrooms or locker rooms. Transgender children struggle for years to understand their identity, and using the restroom is the most basic of human rights, regardless of a child's gender identity. My son has the basic human right to use the restroom that he best identifies with, without accommodation to use a faculty or other more private restroom. Accommodations, which may seem like a reasonable compromise, may out a child that is not open about their gender identity to friends or teachers. How does the legislature propose that schools police students in using the restroom of their choice? Will there be a genitalia check at the door? Of course not. That's invasive and absurd. It's just like this bill. This bill purports to protect children, particularly young women. There is no crisis of male-identifying transgender children assaulting other children. There are 0 confirmed cases of, quote, boys dressing as girls to perpetrate a rape in a restroom. The research is clear. Children, regardless of gender, are most likely to be sexually abused by a family member or family friend, not some made-up scenario where a male-identifying student decides to be a female for an hour or a day. This simply does not happen. There are numerous legal reasons other states have abandoned similar bills. They are enjoined, stayed, and reversed. This bill, even if it becomes state law, will ultimately fail. It will be contested in court, and precedent indicates utter failure at every level. In the meantime, if you choose to pass this bill, the state will endure ridicule, financial burdens on taxpayers, and worse still, making our children feel unwelcome in their state. That is the opposite of protecting our most vulnerable of children.
And Ms. Thank you very much for your comments.
Thank you for your time.
Next speaker is Carmen Harvey. Ms. Harvey, thank you. 2 minutes if you can do that for us, please.
Thank you so much, Chairman and members of this esteemed committee. It's good to see some familiar faces. We lost some faces, I see. So let me see if I can expedite this. First of all, the name is pronounced Carmarian D. Anderson Harvey. I do use the pronouns she, her, and hers. I serve as the Alabama State Director with the Human Rights Campaign. Many of us know that we're the largest LGBTQ+ civil rights organization working on behalf of equality for the LGBTQ community. As someone who is trans-identified over 30 years ago and understand this conversation we're having around gender bathrooms or perhaps school facilities, what the sponsor failed to realize and note is that even though he may not be saying trans-identified or gender expansive, we have to think of all students, those that have a gender expansive background, those that are disabled, those that are bullied, and we're going to be forcing them to be in a position where there's no adults to protect them if bullying does happen. So let me just give you a couple things that I think is important. Transgender students pose no threat at all to their fellow students. Unlike us adults, you know, youth are innocent and their friends, they love their friends for who they are. But they don't pose any threats. There's no reason they should be kept from using the restroom or facilities that aligns with their gender identity. No reason at all, other than we as adults are misunderstanding and disapproving gender expansive, as we call transgender youth. This bill is dangerous and troublesome. This so-called bathroom bill, which seeks to provide protection and safety, does neither of that on both sides. This bill has more work to be done if we're really going to call this a safety bill. The hottest trend in legislation of 2016, there were several bills that attempted to be passed, such as South Dakota, which was vetoed, and subsequently North Carolina. Texas followed suit with the bathroom bill back in 2017, which was defeated in both the regular and special session after the Texas Association of Business estimated $8.5 million in economy loss with 185 jobs per risk.
Thank you, ma'am. The time's expired. Thank you for your comment.
Thank you for your time.
A motion is in order. A motion and a second. Clerk, call the roll.
Senator Albritton, Senator Chambliss, Senator Coleman Madison.
No.
Senator Elliott.
Aye.
Senator Gavan, Senator Gudger, Senator Orr, Senator Roberts, Senator Fortier, Senator Shelnut, Senator Butler.
Aye.
Senator Hawley.
Nine ayes, one no. The bill receives a favorable report. Thank you, Representative Stadhagen. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Chairman, committee members.